Hi, my name is Richard Palno. I'm an SC for Zerto. Is anyone familiar with Zerto? Know who we are, what we do? Okay, well, I'm going to take us through this, and I like to keep these interactive, especially when I have such a huge crowd like this. So stop me. I'm a sales engineer, so I'm part tech, part sales, and I'm here to answer questions for you. And I'll kind of walk through some of the more marketing type slides and then get into who and what we really are. It's gotten to the point where major disruptions are the norm and not a rare event. I mean, people think about disaster recovery and they think about the tornado, they think about the hurricane, a massive fire, but things are actually much more mundane than that. It's ransomware, it's a SQL database corruption, it's an admin who mistakenly deletes a major directory, and if you're using common technologies like array-based replication, that array is going to faithfully reproduce that event at your secondary site. 1 in 3 companies has had at least one major disruption in the past 5 years, and this is according to Forrester. And it's not just planned downtime that hurts you. Planned downtime is impactful as well. How many people here have loaded a Windows update and had to tank the server? Does that ever happen? How would you like to be able to do that in a test environment? Spin it up, test it out non-disruptively, to make sure that it's actually going to work, because of course Microsoft is always perfect in all of their patching. So what we're really trying to do is evolve beyond disaster recovery. People have been backing up for years, recovering at places like SunGuard or doing it yourself, and while those methods do work, they're a little bit cumbersome and they're not really providing you any IT resilience. So once we actually achieve IT resilience, now you can withstand any disaster that might befall you, embrace change, and focus on your business instead of figuring out how to back your things up and recover them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how Zerto revolutionized disaster recovery. I'll give you a 5-second bio. Before I came to Zerto, I was with NetApp for 5 years. Before that, I was a DR consultant for SunGuard availability services. So I tend to think of the world from a disk array point of view, with trying to keep in mind what disaster recovery is really all about. So back in 2011, and even older than that, people relied on array-based replication. And I'm not going to say anything bad about array-based replication. They all do a fine job. They copy your volumes from your production site to your DR site, and they do that great. But at the end of the day, what do you have at your DR site? You got a bag full of volumes. And what we decided was that the replication was in the wrong layer. While that does work, it locks you into that one vendor. So if you've got EMC in production, you got to have EMC at DR. NetApp in production, NetApp at DR. Wouldn't it be great if we actually just moved that replication up into the hypervisor layer? Now all of a sudden you can start thinking about recovering an application. I want to recover my CRM, and that CRM happens to be running on these 10 VMs on 5 different ESX hosts and 3 different storage arrays. I now can think about recovering an application. Instead of having to worry about volumes and LUNs and what VM they're attached to and having to knit the whole thing all together, wouldn't it be great if you could automate that entire process? The world is moving towards more things that are software defined. Look at what vSphere, and I'll even grant HyperV in here, what they've done to server virtualization. Storage is becoming more virtualized. The network is becoming more virtualized. Everyone is trying to become completely software-based. So what we do for you is we're trying to keep you resilient to be able to change with whatever your environment's going to do for you today. Today we support vSphere and HyperV, so you're not locked into any one hypervisor. You're not locked into any server vendor, and you're not locked into any storage vendor. Since we actually replicate at the hypervisor level, you can mix and match your storage arrays to your heart's content. What we do is we actually provide continuous data protection. If you give us the resources, we're going to take a checkpoint every 5 seconds and keep those changes stored in a journal at your secondary site. So you can roll back to any point in time within that journal. do non-disruptive testing, and every time you do a test, we actually generate a full report that you can use for your compliance people to prove that you're actually testing DR. We can replicate many sites into one. We can move workloads from one data center to another, again, crossing back and forth between HyperV and vSphere. Within a vSphere environment, we don't care what version you're running, as long as you're above 4.0 update 1. We can go from 5.5 to 6, back and forth all day, don't care. We can replicate, do a fan in from many sites to one. On our November release that we're coming out, we can actually do a fan out so you can replicate to multiple different data centers at the same time. We're going to give you the ability to evolve with the cloud. We support Amazon today. We'll have Azure on our November release. We actually replicate out to the IBM soft layer as well as over 250 Zerto cloud service providers. Matter of fact, kind of an interesting story here about vCloud Air is that VMware has actually pushed that off to IBM soft layer, and if you go over 25 VMs, guess who the engine is underneath that? It's Zerto. We kind of like to laugh at that and say now VMware is actually selling Zerto. And we give you a simple, unified GUI, regardless of whether you're going to your data center or out to a cloud provider, same look, same feel, same easy-to-use GUI. I'm going to touch about a little bit about ZVR 5.0. This is our upcoming release, going to be available the second week of November. Big things that we're doing is now replication of Microsoft Azure. A lot of people have all these Microsoft credits out there, and what are you going to do with them? Well, you could actually replicate out and do DR at Azure. We're going to do one-to-many replication. So I can take my VM and I can replicate it to 3 different locations if I want to. We're extending the journal up to 30 days, so you can roll back 30 days to be able to do a recovery, and we got a new mobile app because, you know, everybody wants an app for that. So let's talk a little bit about how recovery to Azure works. The way Zerto actually works is we're a completely software solution. We have a small Windows VM that acts as a communication and coordination portal, acts as a plug-in to either vCenter or System Center, small, 2 gig, 2 CPU, 4 gig of RAM. And then we deploy what we call a VRA, or a virtual replication appliance, on each individual ESX hosts. And what the VRA's job is actually to do is to act as a data mover. So it sits up and monitors the vSCSI bus, and when a VM pushes a write down to the storage layer, we see that write and we mirror it to the secondary site. Whether it's Amazon, Azure, or going to your private cloud or your own cloud, it's the same mechanism. From a difference with Azure, what we do is we have a single VM that acts as both the communication VM as well as the replication VM as well. One of the advantages with using Azure over Amazon is we're writing directly to a storage account, so we don't have to do an import, or as I like to say more accurately, copying from S3 storage up into the elastic block storage. So your recovery time objective is actually measured in minutes as opposed to hours in an Amazon solution.
Amazon or Azure?
Pardon?
Amazon or Azure? You were saying that was Azure.
This is Azure. With Amazon, we do that as well. We've actually had that for a while. But with Amazon, you're actually writing out to an S3 storage bucket, and you then need to import that up into the elastic block storage when you actually want to do a recovery. Make sense? We've extended the journal out to 30 days. And what this does is it gives you the ability to roll back to a point in time before that event occurred. If you actually give us the resources, we'll create a checkpoint every 5 seconds. Real world numbers, you're going to see, generally speaking, between 10 to 15 seconds. The biggest detractor on that is the size of the pipe. What I like to say is it's basic math. If you're trying to shove 5 terabytes down a 100 meg pipe, it's going to take some time to get there. What we'll do is we'll push that recovery point objective out to be able to maintain consistencies between all the VMs within a virtual protection group. We actually replicate all of the VMs in total lockstep, so when you actually do a recovery, all of the VMs that comprise that application are at an absolute consistent point in time with write order fidelity. We give you the ability to recover a site, an application, an individual VM, and individual files and folders. So we can go back, roll back through the journal, and do single file restores right out of the journal. We support several different platforms: vSphere, HyperV, Azure, Amazon, and we have over 250 Zerto cloud service providers. So in case you don't want to stand up a secondary site, we have people that can offer DR as a service to you. Question?
How do you deal with data that's still in memory that has been acknowledged as a write, but yet hasn't put it to disk, which then has not gotten to the specific bus yet?
We actually maintain a bitmap to make sure that that gets carried over.
Oh, for the memory?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So and that's proprietary change block mechanisms that we created. Actually, I got a pitch from the previous people here talking about Recover Point. That is the only other real product out there that can create what I'm going to call a consistency group amongst your VMs, even if they're on different storage arrays. And it just so happens that the people that founded Zerto wrote Recover Point, sold it as Kasha years ago. So those are the only two products out there that can actually look at your entire environment and create a consistent point in time with VMs that are on different hosts and different storage arrays. The big ticket item on here is what I'm going to call one-to-many replication. In our previous version, a VM could only be a member of one virtual protection group. Now we can go one-to-many, and we simultaneously replicate these out to multiple sites. RPOs will still be measured in seconds, and the targets can be a local, remote, or multiple remote sites. So how does it actually work? In our current method, which is called 4.5, a VM is a member of a protection group. What we've done now is we're giving you the ability to put a particular VM in multiple protection groups at the same time. And this is going to give you the ability to recover one, all, or just a subset of the VMs themselves. We have an arbitrary number today of a VM being able to be a member of 3 protection groups, but if we get some business cases that can prove why you'd want to do more than that, we'll tweak that out on a subsequent release. The VM will remain absolutely consistent in all of the protection groups it belongs to. We can configure different service level agreements on them as well, and I'll show you some use cases here coming up here. No performance impact, and each one will have their own replica disks and journal at their replicated site. So a good use case here is to replicate locally. So you can do instantaneous restores and keep a different protection group out to a secondary site or cloud service provider. This gives you the ability to actually recover to production locally without any latency of actually having to bring back and communicate with a DR site. We can protect against local failures, and we can do really fast file restores on a local level, as well as, you can actually use this to be able to bring satellite offices in as well. It allows you to actually effectively use the cloud. Keep a short journal, let's say 24 hours locally for fast restores, and set a longer term SLA out there up to 30 days at a secondary site. And you can do this with cloud service providers, Amazon or Azure. It allows you to actually use the economies of scale out at a cloud provider to your advantage. And we have several DR as a service providers and provide local data protection. Another use case is to be able to actually change your DR site. So if you're replicating out to a recovery site now, you spin up another virtual protection group with the same VMs, send them to a secondary site. This allows you to be able to do DR to a service provider or change service providers. If you don't like the one you're with today, switch back and forth between Azure and Amazon, and you'll never lose data protection because you're always replicating to both sites. And when you're done, it allows you to try the cloud before you switch or another service provider to see if they're going to give you what you need. And when you're done, delete that protection group, and you're now replicating to the other side. We can actually recover the entire protection group from a DR site, as well as then being able to replicate locally and recover individual VMs or subsets of VMs. And a use case for this would be, let's say only your app server got damaged. You could then bring back just the app server instead of the entire protection group. So it gives you a lot more flexibility in how you do your restores. And of course, everybody wants an app nowadays. On our first release, this will be a read-only capability, but you can actually, at a moment's glance, look at all of the different sites you have, all from a single pane of glass. Monitor your alerts, events, things like that. Further down the road, we'll actually be able to execute a recovery from your remote device. So you could be sipping your Mai Tai on the beaches of Cancun and fail your data center over. Now, personally, if I'm in Cancun with Mai Tai in my hand, I don't want my manager to know where I am. Some of the features we've rolled into, these are actually more pertinent to people that have actually used Zerto, but we used to actually lock that ESX host out from going into maintenance mode. We have lifted that restriction. As a matter of fact, if you actually vMotion all of those VMs off to other ESX hosts, it'll automatically shut down our VRA, something that our users have been asking for a while. And we made some improvements to our initial synchronization as well. We actually parallelized everything, so now we can have multiple streams from the disks themselves, and it'll speed up that initial sync by about 50%. This is something that actually people have been talked about in earlier sessions too. We have a full RESTful API, so we can integrate it with other things like vRealize. We have most of the commandlets pre-built, so if you actually are a PowerShell person, our guide is now up to almost 200 pages. Literally most of the things that you'd want to do have already been thought out and done for you, so you can copy and paste right out of the document, so you can actually script things for yourself. And we are trying to be resilient to what is changing out in the marketplace today. We now will be supporting Azure, SoftLayer. We'll probably be doing Docker next year as well as doing things like the Acropolis hypervisor from Nutanix. We're out here to react and keep you resilient and give you the ability to change your mind about your infrastructure as you move forward. And I am open for questions and answers. I know that was kind of a high flyover presentation.
What's the overhead on the ESX host?
Very minimal. Well, we estimate about 2%.
2% of CPU consumption?
Yes. Because
Would be just network transferring the data, right?
the VRAs themselves are 1 CPU, 3 gig of RAM. We can bump that up to 2 CPU, up to 16 gig of RAM. The things that will impact that most is extremely high I/O rate and a lot of daily change rate, a lot of blocks changing, and that will be the actual impact on that. You can actually move some of the workloads around because when you put it in, deploy it, a VRA will bind to another VRA at the secondary site. If you see that one host is being impacted a little bit, you can move those around, move those VMs around a little bit, so it actually will balance the load across all of the ESX hosts.
What's the largest number of databases that you've seen this product replicate?
Databases concurrently?
In a farm, in a cluster, or anything on ESX? Yeah.
Quite a few, actually. I have a bank in Omaha that's replicating to Chicago, and they rewrite their SQL databases every night. That's over 20 terabytes of daily change rate. During the day, during normal operations, their RPO is at 13 seconds. When they rewrite that whole database, it's a 1 gig pipe, so that rolls back quite a bit at that point in time, but then it catches right back up. We incur... Pardon? It is priced per protected VM. So if you have 500 VMs in your environment, you decide that 50 or 100 of them are tier 1, then you would license 50 or 100 VMs. We don't care how many hosts you have. We don't care how many sites you have. It is strictly by protected VM.
When you replicate to AWS or Azure, what format is the
We just send blocks out there. We replicate at the application layer, so when an application changes a block, we replicate that out to the secondary site.
And you were saying you replicate between VMware and HyperV?
Yep.
And then you can spin up that VMware image on HyperV
Without much pain. You do need to have, in a VMware side, you have to have VM tools loaded. On Hyper-V, you have to have integration services loaded, so you can actually handle the re-IP of it in case you want to change your IP address. The way people actually normally use this is that you define two networks, one for production, so when you actually do a lot, what I call a live or a real failover, it'll come up with one set of IP addresses, and for a test, you create a bubble network that can't run out to the real world, and so then you can kick off a test in the middle of the day, a remote console in, make sure that everything is actually running, and this enables you to do things like testing your recovery from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, so you don't have to like spend your nights and weekends doing a DR test. And then once they're spun up out there too, since it's a VM at that point, you could try loading a Microsoft patch to see if it's actually going to damage your server. If it works out there, you know it's going to work in production.
Thank you.
Certainly, and thank you much for your time. You can contact us. I'm glad to do a demo of it. Frankly, people accuse us of lying. They go, it can't be that simple. Unless there's something unusual in your environment, we can have it up, running, and installed, replicating inside of an hour.
They work with Barracuda.
Pardon?
We just did an investment in Barracuda for backups and taking that to the cloud as well.
Well, and I will never say anything bad about a backup product, but we actually do a replication of the data and the orchestration of the VMs as well. So when you click that button to recover, and it literally is a button, it's like 4 clicks to bring up the data center. We spin up the disks, we synchronize to the point in time that you requested, and then we spin up all the VMs and attach it.
So you don't interface with Barracuda.
I would say no. They would be a complementary product. I mean, the way I look at it now is our journal can go up to 14 days on the current release. If you needed a backup longer than 14 days, we won't protect that. So I would say that we are for the critical tier 1 apps and things that can handle a little bit more time, but you need a longer retention period. A backup tool like that works just great.